Ignoring a lie is easy until the whole world begins calling it your name. Every autumn, when the Harvest Moon Festival arrived in Frost Hollow Pack, laughter echoed across the village square as families gathered beneath banners decorated with silver wolves and golden maple leaves. Children chased one another between colorful market stalls, while musicians filled the crisp afternoon air with cheerful melodies. Yet among hundreds of smiling faces, one young woman walked alone as though she did not belong in the celebration at all. Emily Carter lowered her eyes and quietly tightened the hood of her faded gray cloak before continuing across the cobblestone street. She had learned long ago that meeting someone's gaze often invited another whispered insult. There she is. The words floated through the crowd almost immediately. The cursed Omega. Another voice answered without lowering its volume. Stay away from her. Bad luck follows wherever she goes. Emily never stopped walking. She had heard the same words for nearly 10 years. At first they had broken her heart. Then they had become familiar. Finally, they had become nothing more than another sound carried by the wind. She carried a small basket filled with herbs she had gathered before sunrise, hoping to trade them for flour and lamp oil before returning to the tiny cabin where she lived alone beyond the edge of the forest. No one invited her to village dinners. No one celebrated her birthday. Even children had been taught to keep their distance. Years earlier, after a series of unfortunate events struck the pack during the same season Emily's parents disappeared, frightened rumors had slowly transformed into unquestioned belief. Some claimed the harvest failed because she had walked through the fields. Others whispered that storms followed wherever she traveled. There had never been proof, only fear repeated often enough to sound like truth. Emily had stopped trying to defend herself because every explanation only convinced people she had something to hide. She believed actions mattered more than arguments, even if no one seemed willing to notice them. Reaching the marketplace, she quietly arranged small bundles of lavender, rosemary, and wild mint upon a simple wooden table. The fragrance drifted gently through the cool autumn air, yet customers chose neighboring stalls instead. An elderly woman approached, studied the herbs for a moment, then glanced toward two nearby merchants shaking their heads almost imperceptibly. Without saying a word, she turned away. Emily smiled politely anyway. She wished the woman a pleasant afternoon, though the greeting received no reply. Hours passed. The sun climbed higher while most of her herbs remained untouched. A sudden gust of wind scattered several bundles across the street. Before Emily could gather them, a little boy rushed forward and picked one up with innocent curiosity. His mother immediately hurried over, gently pulling him back. "Do not touch those," she whispered nervously. "Come with me." The child looked confused but obediently followed her into the crowd. Emily quietly bent down, collected the scattered herbs one by one, brushed away the dust, and placed them neatly back into her basket. Not once did frustration appear upon her face. Nearby, a small sparrow fluttered helplessly beside an overturned crate after becoming tangled in loose twine. Most people walked past without noticing. Emily knelt carefully, freed the tiny bird with patient hands, and watched it soar into the bright blue sky. She smiled softly as it disappeared beyond the rooftops, finding comfort in a kindness no audience had witnessed. Across the square, several villagers noticed only that she had been crouching alone. One man folded his arms uneasily. "See," he muttered. "She is always doing something strange." Others nodded, never asking what had truly happened. As the afternoon light settled across the village, church bells echoed from the hill above Frost Hollow Pack, announcing the approaching arrival of an honored royal guest. Excited conversations instantly replaced fearful whispers as everyone hurried toward the main road. Emily quietly packed away her unsold herbs, intending to leave before the celebration became even more crowded. She did not know that somewhere beyond the distant forest, the Alpha King was already riding toward the village, carrying no knowledge of the rumors that had imprisoned her life, and no intention of believing a single word until he had seen the truth with his own eyes. Emily Carter left the marketplace just as the church bells faded into the cool autumn air, carrying the same basket of unsold herbs she had brought that morning. The path leading away from Frost Hollow Pack wound gently through towering pine trees whose branches filtered the golden afternoon sunlight into soft ribbons across the forest floor. It was a road she had walked almost every day for years, and strangely, The silence waiting beneath the trees always felt kinder than the voices she left behind inside the village. Her small cabin stood near the edge of a quiet stream where wildflowers bloomed every spring and deer often wandered peacefully at dawn. The roof had been repaired more times than she could count, the wooden porch leaned slightly with age, and climbing ivy covered one side of the stone chimney, yet to Emily it remained the only place where no one looked at her with fear. She carefully arranged the herbs inside small clay jars, hung fresh bundles of lavender from the ceiling beams to dry, and stirred a kettle of herbal tea over the tiny fireplace. Shelves filled with neatly labeled plants lined one wall, each gathered from the surrounding forest through years of patient learning. Although the villagers believed she lived alone because of some mysterious curse, the truth was much simpler. The forest had become her friend after people had chosen not to be. Just before sunset, Emily noticed faint movement outside her window. A young deer stood beside the stream, favoring one front leg while struggling to drink. Setting down her cup without hesitation, she quietly stepped outside, moving slowly so she would not frighten the gentle animal. The deer attempted to step backward but quickly lost its balance. Emily knelt several feet away, speaking in a calm, reassuring voice until the frightened creature relaxed enough to remain still. She gently examined the injured leg and discovered a thorn lodged between the hoof. With careful hands and remarkable patience, she removed it before washing the small wound with clean water gathered from the stream. The deer blinked at her for a long moment, then slowly stood without pain. After taking several confident steps, it disappeared gracefully into the trees. Emily smiled with quiet satisfaction, never expecting gratitude beyond seeing the animal healthy again. As evening settled across the forest, she wrapped several small bundles of dried herbs and placed them into a cloth bag. When darkness finally covered the narrow trails, she quietly walked back toward the village without anyone noticing. At the doorstep of an elderly widower whose aching joints often kept him indoors, she left the herbs along with simple instructions for brewing warm tea before disappearing into the shadows. She continued farther down the street, leaving another small bundle outside the home of a young mother, whose little daughter had been coughing for several days. Emily never knocked. She never waited to be thanked. Before dawn each morning, the mysterious gifts always appeared without explanation, and the villagers often wondered who the anonymous helper might be. Ironically, many believed the same unseen kindness came from someone blessed by fate, while never imagining it came from the woman they called cursed. Far beyond the village road, a rider approached beneath the silver light of the rising moon. Logan Ashford, the Alpha King, guided his horse steadily through the forest accompanied only by two trusted guards traveling several hundred yards behind him. He had already heard whispers about the strange Omega who supposedly brought misfortune wherever she walked. Listening quietly to every story during his journey, he had offered only one simple reply each time. Rumors tell me what people believe. They do not tell me what is true. With that thought resting calmly in his mind, he continued toward Frost Hollow Pack, unaware that before sunrise he would meet the woman everyone feared, and nothing he witnessed afterward would resemble the stories he had been told. The first rays of sunrise spread gently across Frost Hollow Pack as Logan Ashford guided his horse through the quiet village streets, dressed not as a king but as an ordinary traveler wrapped in a dark wool cloak. Only two trusted shadow guards followed from a careful distance, blending naturally among merchants preparing their market stalls. Logan had chosen to travel without royal banners because he wanted to see the truth before anyone recognized him. Throughout the journey, every village elder and merchant had repeated the same warning. They all spoke of the mysterious Omega who supposedly carried misfortune wherever she walked. Some claimed livestock became sick after seeing her. Others insisted poor harvests began because she crossed the fields. Yet not one person had described witnessing these things with their own eyes. Every story began with someone saying they had heard it from another. Logan quietly remembered his late father's favorite lesson. Fear grows strongest when no one asks for proof. As the marketplace slowly came alive, Logan purchased a loaf of fresh bread from the village bakery before sitting alone beneath a broad maple tree overlooking the square. From there he could observe without drawing attention. Before long, Emily Carter appeared carrying another basket of carefully gathered herbs. Just as she had done the previous afternoon, she quietly arranged each bundle with remarkable care, greeting every passerby with a gentle smile despite receiving almost no response. Logan watched silently as several customers deliberately chose neighboring stalls even though Emily's herbs were fresher and more carefully prepared. Not once did disappointment appear upon her face. Instead, she calmly wished each customer a pleasant day. A short time later, an elderly man entered the marketplace carrying a heavy sack of flour over one shoulder. Halfway across the uneven cobblestones, the sack slipped from his grasp, spilling flour across the street. Several people glanced toward him before continuing with their own errands. Emily immediately left her table and hurried over. Without saying a word, she knelt beside the old man and helped gather what could still be saved into a clean cloth she carried inside her basket. She brushed the remaining flour from his coat before carefully lifting the heavy sack together with him. The old man thanked her quietly, but after noticing nearby villagers watching, his smile faded into uncomfortable silence. He lowered his eyes, accepted the repaired bundle, and hurried away without another word. Emily simply returned to her herbs as though nothing unusual had happened. Logan found himself studying not the old man's reaction but Emily's. She showed no resentment, no sadness. She seemed almost accustomed to kindness being accepted without acknowledgement. As the morning continued, a sudden autumn breeze swept through the square, sending loose papers tumbling from a merchant's table. Emily instinctively chased after them before they disappeared beneath passing wagons. She gathered every page, carefully straightened the folded corners, and returned them with another quiet smile. The grateful merchant accepted the papers, yet moments later he still warned a customer not to stand too close to her stall. Logan slowly exhaled. The contradiction was impossible to ignore. The woman everyone feared had quietly become the person solving small problems throughout the entire marketplace while asking nothing in return. Near midday, one of the disguised shadow guards approached Logan discreetly. "Your Majesty," he whispered softly, "shall we reveal your identity?" Logan shook his head without hesitation. His silver eyes remained fixed upon Emily as she patiently helped a little girl tie a broken ribbon around her basket before sending the child happily back to her mother. "No," he answered calmly. "The truth is only beginning to reveal itself." At that very moment, Emily looked briefly toward the maple tree where Logan sat. Their eyes met for only an instant before she offered the same warm, respectful smile she had given every stranger throughout the morning. Then she quietly returned to her work, completely unaware that the traveler observing her was not searching for a cursed Omega at all. He was beginning to discover one of the kindest hearts he had ever encountered. The following morning arrived wrapped in crisp autumn air as sunlight filtered gently through the towering pines surrounding Frost Hollow Pack. Logan Ashford returned to the village once again before most merchants had finished arranging their stalls. Still dressed as an ordinary traveler, he quietly walked through the marketplace carrying only a small satchel, determined to observe without influencing anything around him. Emily Carter was already there, placing fresh bundles of rosemary, lavender and mountain thyme upon her modest wooden table. Although yesterday had ended with almost no sales, she greeted the new day exactly as she always had, with quiet hope instead of disappointment. Logan found himself wondering how someone treated with such constant suspicion could still smile so sincerely. Before long, a young woman hurried across the square carrying a basket filled with fresh apples. One loose stone caught beneath her shoe, causing the basket to slip from her hands. Bright red apples rolled across the cobblestones in every direction as embarrassed laughter rose from a few nearby villagers. Without the slightest hesitation, Emily stepped away from her own stall and began gathering every apple before they could roll into the muddy street. She carefully wiped each one clean with a soft cloth from her basket before placing them back into the young woman's hands. "Thank you," the woman whispered instinctively. Then she noticed several people watching. Her grateful smile slowly faded into awkward silence. She lowered her eyes, accepted the basket, and hurried away without another word. Emily simply watched her leave before quietly returning to arrange her herbs once again. Logan observed every detail. He noticed that Emily never seemed surprised when kindness was met with distance. It was as though she had accepted loneliness without allowing it to change who she was. Later that afternoon, dark clouds briefly drifted across the sky, bringing a light shower that scattered shoppers beneath nearby awnings. Logan stepped beneath the roof of a small bakery where he noticed Emily standing nearby, carefully shielding a basket of herbs from the rain. At the opposite end of the porch, an elderly traveler searched through empty pockets before quietly setting down a loaf of bread he could no longer afford. Emily watched the exchange for only a moment. Before approaching the baker, she quietly placed several of her own coins onto the counter and nodded toward the bread. "Please let him believe someone made a mistake with the price," she said softly. "He does not need to know it came from me." The baker looked at her with genuine surprise before silently agreeing. Moments later, the elderly traveler smiled with grateful relief as the baker insisted there had been a misunderstanding. Emily slipped away before the man could discover what had happened. Logan felt something inside him shift. This was no longer simple generosity. She protected the dignity of the people she helped, making certain they never felt embarrassed by accepting kindness. As the rain stopped and sunlight returned, Logan walked toward Emily's stall for the very first time. She looked up with the same gentle smile she offered every stranger. "Good afternoon," she said warmly. "Would you like some fresh herbs for your journey?" Logan studied her calm expression for a brief moment before selecting a small bundle of lavender. "You seem to know a great deal about helping people," he replied. Emily smiled almost shyly as she wrapped the herbs in brown paper. "Sometimes people need herbs," she answered softly. "Sometimes they only need someone to notice them." Logan accepted the bundle, placing a few coins upon the table. "That is a rare way of seeing the world." Emily shook her head gently. "I think the world has always been that way. We simply forget to look." Their eyes met for another quiet moment before Logan wished her a pleasant afternoon and continued walking through the village. Behind him, one of the disguised shadow guards approached discreetly and whispered, "Your Majesty, every rumor has been wrong." Logan looked back once more at the young Omega calmly arranging her herbs beneath the afternoon sunlight. A faint smile appeared across his face as certainty quietly replaced curiosity. The pack had spent years searching for a curse, while completely overlooking one of the greatest blessings living among them. By the 5th day of the Harvest Festival, Frost Hollow Pack had become busier than ever as merchants from neighboring villages filled every corner of the marketplace with colorful fabrics, fresh bread, polished woodwork, and baskets overflowing with late autumn produce. Excited conversations echoed through the streets while musicians performed cheerful songs beneath rows of fluttering banners. Logan Ashford continued moving quietly among the crowd in the simple clothing of a traveler, revealing nothing about his true identity. The more time he spent observing Emily Carter, the more impossible the stories surrounding her became to believe. Everywhere she went, small acts of kindness quietly followed. She never searched for attention, and she always disappeared before anyone could thank her. Late that morning, Emily noticed a little girl sitting alone beside the village fountain, clutching an empty ribbon in trembling hands while tears rolled down her cheeks. Emily slowly approached and knelt beside her. "What happened?" she asked gently. The little girl sniffled before answering. "My grandmother made me a little cloth rabbit, but I lost it somewhere in the market." Emily smiled reassuringly. "Then let us find it together." Without hesitation, she began searching beneath market tables, benches, and flower carts while the child followed closely behind. Logan quietly watched from across the square. Nearly 20 minutes passed before Emily finally discovered the tiny handmade rabbit resting beneath a wagon wheel, where no one else had noticed it. She carefully brushed away the dust before placing it into the little girl's hands. The child's face brightened immediately with overwhelming joy as she hugged the toy tightly against her chest. Her grateful mother hurried over and reached into her purse. "Please let me pay you for your kindness." Emily gently shook her head with a warm smile. "Keep it. I think seeing someone smile is worth much more." The woman thanked her sincerely before leading her daughter away. Logan could not help smiling to himself. Moments later, another unexpected situation unfolded. One of the older merchants accidentally knocked over a wooden display, scattering handcrafted pottery across the cobblestones. Several customers stepped backward, worried they might break something. Emily immediately hurried over, carefully lifting each piece one at a time and helping rebuild the display exactly as it had been before. The merchant sighed with relief. "You always seem to appear whenever someone needs help," he said quietly. Emily simply smiled. Perhaps we all notice the people who need us if we slow down enough to look. As she returned toward her small herb stall, several villagers glanced at one another with uncertainty. Their old fears no longer matched what they had been witnessing throughout the week. Some still avoided speaking to her, but others quietly began questioning whether the stories they had believed for years had ever been true at all. Logan noticed the change immediately. Fear, he realized, often disappeared the moment people finally allowed themselves to see instead of merely repeating what they had heard. During the afternoon, he deliberately approached Emily's table once again. "Your lavender lasted longer than I expected," he said with a friendly smile while placing the empty wrapping paper upon the table. Emily looked pleasantly surprised. "I am glad it served you well." Logan selected another small bundle of herbs before asking casually, "Does it ever become difficult to keep helping people who rarely return your kindness?" Emily paused thoughtfully before answering, "Kindness is a choice I make for myself, not a bargain I make with someone else. If I stopped being kind because other people forgot how, then fear would have changed me too." Her words settled deeply within Logan's heart. In that quiet moment, every rumor he had heard during his journey seemed smaller than ever before. Looking at the young Omega standing peacefully beneath the golden autumn light, he no longer saw someone rejected by her pack. He saw a woman whose quiet strength had endured years of loneliness without allowing bitterness to take root, and he realized that the greatest test of character was not remaining kind when the world loved you, but continuing to choose kindness when the world had given you every reason to stop. The final afternoon of the Harvest Festival arrived beneath a brilliant blue sky as the entire pack gathered. Inside the central square for the traditional blessing ceremony, a celebration believed to ensure peace and prosperity before winter. Long wooden tables overflowed with fresh bread, fruit, and flowers while silver banners bearing the crest of Frost Hollow Pack fluttered gently in the cool autumn breeze. Every family stood together waiting for the village elder to begin the ceremony. Emily Carter quietly remained near the back of the crowd, hoping to leave unnoticed once the gathering ended. She had learned that celebrations rarely became easier simply because time had passed. Logan Ashford watched everything from the edge of the square, still dressed as the same ordinary traveler who had spent the past several days observing the village. He had already reached his own conclusion about Emily, yet he sensed that fate had one final truth waiting to reveal itself. As the ceremony began, the village elder lifted a carved wooden bowl filled with harvested grain before suddenly pausing. A strong gust of wind swept across the square, knocking the bowl from the platform and scattering grain across the cobblestones. An uneasy silence settled over the crowd. Before anyone could speak, one frightened voice rose from the gathering. "It is another bad omen." Another villager looked toward Emily almost instinctively. "She is here." Within moments, old fears returned more quickly than reason. Whispers spread through the crowd exactly as they had for years. "The curse has returned. Nothing ever goes right when she is nearby." Emily stood perfectly still. She did not argue. She did not plead for anyone to believe her. She had faced this moment too many times before. Quietly lowering her eyes, she bent down and began gathering the scattered grain into the wooden bowl, hoping at least to help repair what had been lost. Several people stepped backward instead of helping her. One mother gently guided her children farther away while others watched in uncomfortable silence. Logan felt disappointment settle heavily within his heart. After everything these villagers had witnessed throughout the week, fear had still managed to speak louder than truth. Emily carefully finished collecting the last handful of grain before carrying the bowl back toward the platform. She offered it respectfully to the village elder with the same calm expression she had worn every day despite years of rejection. "Perhaps the ceremony may continue," she said softly. The elder hesitated, uncertain whether to accept it while the crowd waited anxiously for his decision. Logan realized the moment he had anticipated had finally arrived. Without another second of hesitation, he stepped forward through the silent crowd until he stood beside Emily. She looked up in quiet surprise, recognizing the familiar traveler. Logan accepted the wooden bowl from her hands before turning toward the gathered villagers. His calm voice carried effortlessly across the square. "During the past several days I have watched this woman help your children, your elders, your merchants, and complete strangers." The villagers exchanged uncertain glances. Logan continued, his expression unwavering. "Each time someone needed kindness, She was the first to offer it. Each time someone judged her unfairly, she answered with patience instead of anger. If a single gust of wind is enough to erase everything you have witnessed with your own eyes, then perhaps the problem is not the woman you fear, but the fear you have chosen to protect. The square became completely silent. Emily looked at him with quiet confusion, still believing she stood beside nothing more than a thoughtful traveler. Yet across the marketplace, two familiar figures dressed as merchants slowly stepped forward, their disciplined posture revealing they were no ordinary villagers at all. The shadow guards had received their signal, and before another word could be spoken, every heartbeat in the square seemed to wait for a truth that was finally ready to change everything. The square remained perfectly still as the two disguised shadow guards stepped forward with disciplined precision before lowering themselves onto one knee. Their synchronized movement sent a wave of confusion through the gathered villagers. Before anyone could understand what they were witnessing, dozens of royal guards entered from every corner of the marketplace wearing polished black armor adorned with the silver wolf crest of House Ashford. The cheerful sounds of the harvest festival disappeared into complete silence. Emily Carter looked from the guards to the traveler standing beside her, unable to understand why every soldier seemed to be awaiting his command. Logan Ashford slowly removed the plain dark cloak that had hidden his identity throughout the past week. Beneath it appeared an elegant black royal coat embroidered with intricate silver thread that shimmered beneath the autumn sunlight. The silver crest upon his chest reflected brightly enough that every person in Frost Hollow Pack immediately recognized it. One by one, the villagers lowered their heads in astonishment. The village elder's hands trembled as realization spread across his face. "Your Majesty," he whispered. Logan met his eyes with calm dignity before turning toward the crowd. "Rise," he said gently. "Today I did not come as a king-seeking ceremony. I came as a traveler searching for truth." His voice remained steady, carrying effortlessly across the silent square. "For days I listened to every rumor spoken about Emily Carter. I heard she was cursed. I heard she brought misfortune. I heard she should be feared." He paused, allowing every whispered accusation to settle heavily upon the hearts of those who had spoken them. "Then I chose to watch instead of listening." Logan looked toward Emily, whose quiet blue eyes still reflected disbelief more than relief. "I watched her help an elderly man without expecting gratitude. I watched her return a lost toy to a frightened child. I watched her spend her own coins so a stranger could eat with dignity. I watched her answer suspicion with patience and rejection with compassion." The Alpha King slowly turned back toward the villagers. "Tell me honestly, which one of you witnessed a curse?" No one answered. The silence itself became the only truthful reply. At that moment, another royal carriage entered the square. Every guard bowed respectfully as Queen Mother Eleanor Ashford stepped gracefully onto the cobblestones. Her silver hair glowed beneath the afternoon light as she approached Emily with a warm, reassuring smile. Without hesitation, she gently took the young Omega's hands. "Child," she said softly, "the only thing I have witnessed today is extraordinary courage." Tears quietly gathered in Emily's eyes. For the first time in many years, someone of unquestionable authority looked at her without fear, without doubt and without pity. Queen Mother Eleanor turned toward the villagers with calm wisdom. "Fear repeated for many years can sound like truth," she said. "But truth never changes simply because many people choose to ignore it." Several villagers lowered their eyes in quiet shame. The elderly man Emily had helped with the flower stepped forward first. "We were wrong," he admitted softly. One after another, others followed, each remembering moments when Emily had quietly helped them despite receiving nothing in return. Logan gently stepped beside Emily once more. There was no hesitation in his expression now. Every doubt had disappeared. Looking directly into her eyes, he spoke with quiet sincerity that reached every corner of the silent square. "You spent years believing no one truly saw you." Emily struggled to answer through quiet emotion. Logan smiled gently. "Ido." Above them, golden maple leaves drifted slowly across the clear autumn sky as the pack realized the woman they had feared for so long had never needed to be rescued from a curse. She only needed someone willing to see the truth that had been standing before them all along. The silence lingering across Frost Hollow Pack seemed almost sacred as every villager struggled to reconcile years of fear with the undeniable truth standing before them. Emily Carter remained motionless beside Logan Ashford, still overwhelmed by everything that had happened within a single afternoon. For so many years she had imagined what it might feel like if someone finally believed in her innocence. Yet now that the moment had arrived, it felt almost impossible to accept. Queen Mother Eleanor Ashford gently squeezed Emily's hands before stepping back with a quiet smile that encouraged her to lift her eyes instead of lowering them. Logan turned slowly toward the gathered pack. His calm expression carried the quiet authority of a ruler who had already reached his decision. A kingdom is not measured by the strength of its walls, he said clearly. It is measured by how it treats those who cannot defend themselves against fear and false judgment. Every word settled deeply upon the crowd. The village elder removed the ceremonial medallion from around his neck before walking toward Emily. His eyes reflected sincere regret. For many years, he admitted softly, we allowed stories to become stronger than truth. We judged your silence without understanding your heart. On behalf of Frost Hollow Pack, I ask for your forgiveness. Emily looked at the elderly man who had once avoided speaking to her, and answered with the same quiet grace that had always guided her life. Holding anger would only continue the pain. I would rather choose peace. Several villagers quietly wiped tears from their eyes. The mother who had once pulled her little boy away from Emily stepped forward next, gently guiding the child beside her. I taught my son to fear you, she whispered. Today I want him to learn courage instead. The little boy smiled shyly before offering Emily a small bouquet of wildflowers he had gathered near the village stream. Emily accepted the flowers with genuine warmth, thanking him as though he had given her the greatest gift imaginable. Logan watched every moment with growing admiration. Even after years of rejection, she welcomed kindness without asking anyone to suffer humiliation in return. Queen Mother Eleanor looked toward her son with quiet understanding. She had seen the same expression only once before, on the day his father had chosen to rule with compassion instead of pride. Logan stepped forward until he stood directly before Emily. The autumn breeze carried golden maple leaves gently between them while the afternoon sun illuminated the quiet certainty in his silver eyes. Several days ago, he said softly, I arrived here searching for the truth behind a rumor. Instead, I found a woman whose kindness remained unshaken after years of loneliness, misunderstanding, and unfair judgment. Emily met his gaze without fear for the first time. Logan slowly reached out. His hand, not as a command from a king, but as an invitation offered with complete respect. The pack called you cursed, he continued, his voice steady enough for every person in the square to hear. I have seen nothing but courage, compassion, and quiet strength. Before these witnesses, before my mother, and before the people of this kingdom, I wish to make my choice known. Every heartbeat seemed to pause. Logan gently took Emily's hand. The woman this pack rejected is the woman I choose as my bride. A quiet gasp spread through the marketplace before disappearing into complete silence. No one questioned his decision. No one dared repeat the old rumors. Queen Mother Eleanor smiled with peaceful pride while the royal guards respectfully lowered their heads. Emily stood speechless, tears shining softly in her blue eyes as she realized that the name defining her future would no longer be the cruel word others had given her years before. It would be the truth spoken by the Alpha King himself, and beneath a sky filled with drifting autumn leaves, the burden she had carried for so long finally gave way to hope. Golden sunlight slowly settled across Frost Hollow Pack, as though even the autumn sky wished to remember the extraordinary afternoon that had changed the village forever. No one hurried to leave the square. No one spoke above a whisper. The people who had once turned away whenever Emily Carter appeared now looked at her with entirely different eyes. She still wore the same faded gray cloak, still carried the same humble basket of herbs, and still stood with the same quiet kindness that had never changed. The difference had never been within her. It had always been within those finally willing to see her clearly. Logan Ashford continued holding her hand with calm respect, never tightening his grip, never asking more than she was ready to give. His choice had not been made because of a single emotional moment. It had been shaped by every quiet act of compassion he had witnessed throughout the week. Looking toward the gathered villagers, he spoke once more with steady conviction. Remember this day not because your Alpha King made a decision but because truth finally became stronger than fear. The words settled gently across every heart. The village elder stepped forward and bowed respectfully before Emily. Soon another villager followed, then another, until those who had once avoided even standing near her now lowered their heads in sincere apology. Emily looked upon them with gentle understanding rather than resentment. She realized that forgiveness could free the heart, just as surely as justice could restore dignity. "Let today become a new beginning for all of us," she said softly. "No one should carry a name that fear creates." Her simple words carried more strength than anger ever could. Queen Mother Eleanor Ashford smiled with quiet pride, recognizing that the young woman standing before the pack possessed exactly the grace worthy of becoming part of the royal family. She approached Emily and carefully placed a small silver wolf pendant into her hands. "This is not a reward," she said warmly. "It is a symbol that your true worth was always there, even when others failed to recognize it." Emily accepted the pendant with grateful eyes. She understood that the greatest gift she had received was not silver or status. It was finally being seen for who she truly was. As preparations quietly began for the royal procession to return to Ashford Palace, Logan turned toward Emily with the same gentle smile he had first offered as an ordinary traveler. "There is no need to decide everything today," he said. "Walk beside me because you choose to, never because anyone expects you to." Emily looked toward the familiar forest path leading to her little cabin, then toward the road stretching beyond the village toward a future she had never imagined. For years she had believed her life would always remain small, hidden beneath the weight of false rumors. Now she understood that kindness had been quietly preparing a different path all along. She nodded with peaceful confidence. "Then I will walk beside you one step at a time." Logan smiled, and together they began walking across the cobblestone square, neither leading nor following, but moving forward side by side. The villagers watched in respectful silence as golden maple leaves drifted gently through the cool afternoon air, settling softly upon the streets where fear had finally surrendered to truth. Far beyond the rooftops, Ashford Palace shone beneath the brilliant autumn sky, waiting to welcome not merely the future bride of an alpha king, but a woman whose quiet courage had transformed an entire pack. Long after the royal procession disappeared beyond the hills, the people of Frost Hollow Pack continued telling the story of the day they learned that the greatest curse had never been carried by a lonely Omega. It had been carried by prejudice itself. And from that season forward, whenever children asked why kindness mattered even when no one seemed to notice, their parents no longer repeated old rumors. Instead, they remembered the gentle woman who never allowed rejection to change her heart, and the wise alpha king who looked beyond fear, chose truth with his own eyes, and proved that real strength is measured not by power, but by the courage to recognize goodness where everyone else refused to look.